Kevin, you're back in the country, and I don't know if you read the title to this video or not, but we can only say nice things about the sequel trilogy. So,
Yeah, we
so
got this.
I don't know if this is what you planned on coming back, but this is what you walked into. So, for those of you new to the podcast, I'm Will with the Padawan Pops channel. This is my friend Kevin and co-host, and we've been talking about this for a couple weeks now, but the sequel trilogies catch a lot of flack. Now we haven't officially started yet, but there are some complaints. We complain at times, others complain, and
Yeah.
the complaints are warranted in a lot of places, right? Like no movie's perfect. So there are lots of complaints, but we've seen that when we talk about the sequels, we will maybe say something nice and then follow it up with a yeah, but, and talk on from there. So today we're going to try to go we are not going to try. We are going to go a half hour without saying, at least a half hour, without saying anything negative about the sequel. So this is good vibes only for the sequel trilogy. Now, again, commenters, if you're going to be like, oh, Disney shills, whatever, that is not the case. I do have an annual pass, but we have historically complained about the sequels in some shape, form, or fashion. And today we're only going to talk about the highs. So we've got some notes jotted down, making sure we hit our high points. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, and if that's really all you're interested in, it's just hearing people hate on the sequels.
Not this episode.
You can go.
Go check out our reviews on the sequels.
When we did the story of Star Wars, we hit on each movie.
You'll find some there.
And so if you check out there, you'll hear some negatives. But no, like when I sat down to do this and like, okay, I'm only writing down the positives. It was actually, I got to admit, it was kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
To sit down and think about what I liked in these movies without all those caveats popping into the back of my head, just kind of pushing them out like, nope, can't do the butts.
No butts allowed here.
It was kind of refreshing, and it made me realize how easy it is to be negative about some of this stuff. And I think I like some of the things better just focusing on the things I like without all that exception in there. So it was actually kind of refreshing for me. It'll be interesting.
I will ask you this. No negativity, though. When's the last time you watched a sequel movie?
Let's see. One of them was on TV about a month ago. Okay. And I think I watched about 3/4 of it. Okay. And it was...
They're always on TNT or something like that.
I think it was The Force Awakens. Yeah. I think that's what it was.
I caught some bits of The Force Awakens at some point over the past 2 or 3 months. And then before that, I think it was whenever we went through all the movies. And I feel like that's been close to a year now. It was after Ahsoka ended.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I think
so that's...
I think it was last fall. It's been a while. So again, thinking through it, since it's been quite a while, it was fun to see some positives out of this. So the way we're going to do this, Kevin suggested we go through each movie to kind of keep it in order and not just be all over the place or miss anything. So we're going to start with The Force Awakens. We can just alternate, like if you got a positive, I got a positive. And then if it's the same, we can just let each other know. Like that way we're not like, it gets to my turn and I've got more of the same. So you want to start us off with your first positive of The Force Awakens, 2015. Sure. Christmas 2015.
That's
what a
wild,
good time.
That it was almost 10 years ago. I was
a lot younger then.
Yeah. Tell me about it. So The Force Awakens, I think, is a really good start to the saga. I think it echoes A New Hope in a really good way, the same way that The Phantom Menace kind of does, right? Like there's a structure to it that you see in the other two movies where you have this person on this planet and they kind of get swept up into an adventure by this other person who has more experience in the galaxy, and they go on to destroy a large scale thing in space that blows up. Right, that structure exists in all three of the starting movies, right? With Luke and then Anakin and then Rey. So I like the parallel structure, and I think it lays out really, really well. I think it mimics it enough to where it feels like the beginning of those stories.
Mhm.
But it also feels like its own story. I feel like the characters are differentiated enough. So just the structure of the movie itself and the way it echoes back to those other two beginnings of those trilogies.
Yeah.
I like the parallel there, and I
Yeah.
think it's done well in that regard.
We wrote the same thing for our first thing. Like I
Perfect.
said, it was a fun intro to something new, but at the same time, all of those nostalgic feels that you
Yeah.
get, like with Star Wars, it feels it. I know, like we say this a lot. You'll see other content creators, Star Wars people say like it feels like Star Wars, and Star Wars fans knows what that means. Like that.
Yeah.
That's there's not like a description to it, but it just feels like Star Wars. And The Force Awakens just feels like Star Wars. It was new characters, lots of new characters, right? 3 new heroes, new droids, new side characters, new villains, a lot of new, and yet it feels like you were almost walking into something that you've known for your whole life when you're watching it. You've still got the characters you love, Han, Leia, Luke, C-3PO, R2. You've got familiarity there, but it just felt like Star Wars it had been gone for so long, and this just picked right up. And so I remember, I mean, I don't know, it's probably the same for you, but like going and watching it in theaters, it was one of the most fun experiences. Like, oh man, it's back. And there's a lot of money behind this. There's some great acting. Like there's a lot behind this. And it was so fun just being a part of that. And like the whole world watched the movie. It made like $1 billion. It was until the Avengers movie came out, wasn't it like the #1 movie of all time when you
Something
weren't
like that.
when
Yeah,
you
I don't
weren't
remember the
adjusting
specifics
for
of it, but it was
inflation or whatever. So it was just a really, really good time to be a Star Wars fan. It was so fun. So yeah, I agree. It was new and old all at the same time. So I'm going to mark that one off just so I know what I'm looking at here. So my next one I'll go with is the way they went about filming this movie. So I remember in the lead up, I was reading all kinds of articles. Like I was all in on this. So I was in college. It was like my last year or either like next to last year of college. I don't exactly remember, but there was a lot of free time over Christmas break. And so I was just reading all of these articles, getting ready to go watch this movie.
Right.
We had bought our tickets well ahead of time, and they were using practical sets. And it was like, hey, we're going to use all this technology that George used with the prequels, right? Whatever, I'm blanking on it, but all of the special effects and everything. But we're going to go on location. We're going to film it on film. So it's not going to be digital. J.J. Abrams was adamant of filming it on film. So it just looks very good. And I think that may kind of give it that nostalgic feel as well. Like you're just right there in those scenes. And it looked so good. You've got your classic, I mean, as far as Star Wars goes, you've got a snowy planet at one point. You've got a desert planet. You've got the lush green planet. Like you see all the Star Wars stuff. It looks good. So yeah, I mean, John Williams comes back. There's the quality is top notch for this film.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't have that on my list, but that is one that sticks out once you mention it. Is just the quality of the. I mean, it does. It looks fantastic, right? Like there's not any glaring disparity or like clashing between the real and the CGI. Like it all looks really lived in. It all looks really realistic to where the characters are and what's going on. It does look really good. And you know the lighting, especially like with the new lightsabers and the light that they cast, like just talking about the props and the physical stuff that they wanted to use. Like I love the lighting on the lightsabers. It looks fantastic,
especially on this, like the red and the blue on the white snow in that dark forest. That was good. I'm with you there. And even when he's got his saber out on Takodana, like in the forest, it's menacing. Like him walking around with that red saber. That's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
What you got?
Han Solo.
That was my next one.
Definite high point of the movie. I think Han Solo is probably one of my favorite things about this movie. To be able to bring back a character who had been so far removed from cinema, right? Like hadn't been on
Far
screen.
removed.
I mean, long time.
Yeah.
And to make it feel so seamless, like the same character. I mean, Harrison Ford was just right back in the role. It just felt so true to the character, and he's used so well, right, as kind of the mentor to really both Rey and Finn, right? Like he kind of ends up serving as that kind of voice of experience to both of them, and his arc throughout. Seeing his willingness to do the difficult things and understanding where he stands with his son, and just how all of that plays out with his character is one of my best. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie for sure.
Yeah.
And man, I don't think they could have nailed his character any better than they did with The Force Awakens.
I agree. All right, if you're like going into this movie, okay, and let's say you're watching the original trilogy, do you think there's ever a chance that Han Solo plays the Ben Kenobi character in Star Wars? No.
No, yeah.
Like, you don't ever think that's going to happen.
Right.
And then he shows up and just knocks it out of the park. And so that was so good. He kind of drives the movie. I mean, and the way they did this kind of goes into probably the sequels as a whole. One great idea that they had for this was give each one of the big three from the originals their own film. That was such a good idea. And so this one was Han Solo's. Now, Harrison Ford may have said, "You've got one shot to get me in and out," because he was very adamant that Han Solo had a story to tell and a story to wrap up. And so he did, but it was very good. I think, is it his best movie? Is it Han Solo's best movie?
I mean, he's certainly at the center of it more so than any of the other movies, right? Like he's obviously a major player in the original trilogy, but the focus is really Luke, right? And Leia to an extent. So, and as the trilogy goes on, it kind of pulls away from him a little bit. He really does become kind of a supporting character to the two.
Especially in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that regard, like just getting to really focus in on Han Solo, right?
Yeah.
And consistently seeing him interact and how he interacts differently from Rey to Finn to Maz, like he's almost like a different persona for all of them, but it's still
when
Han
all those
Solo.
gangs are closing in on him,
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Selling Raftars.
The charm and the wit, like it's all very much intact. So it might be the best movie of Han Solo.
And just seeing him like that full circle of wrapping that character up, like you watch from where he came in A New Hope to The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same. I mean, it is the same character, but it's not. Like he is fully, his character arc is complete. And so I think there was they handled that with great care. I think they did good with Han Solo.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to talk a little bit about Kylo Ren because I know he's one of your favorites. But
that was next on my list. Yeah,
that scene at the end between him and Ben Solo it's a great scene. And it's heartbreaking. And just man, the death of Han Solo, it hit us all. We're like, man, like we kind of all knew it was going to happen.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. No spoiler. You should know by now.
It's been 10 years. Yeah. Yeah, no, that was that was such a good scene, and for a moment too, it almost makes you wonder, like, is he gonna go with Han right here? Because you think as soon as he goes on the bridge, you go, "Oh, this isn't gonna go good," and then you're thinking, well, maybe there's a chance it goes good, and then no, it does not go good, and so I don't know if in that it's probably like a 6-second scene, maybe where like they're just holding it.
Yep.
Did you think like, oh, he may not kill him, or did you know the whole time that's what was going to happen?
Man, that whole time I had that sinking feeling. I was like, this is it. Like this is which is a appropriate way for Han to go out, right? From smuggler who's invested only in his own self-interest to put himself at risk for the sake of his son and for Leia, trying to bring him back. Like that's something the original Han Solo would never do, right? And so it's really cool to see that in his final moments, that he's like, these experiences have changed him and he is a different person. And ultimately it'll come up with Rise of Skywalker, one of my other favorite scenes. It makes a difference, right? Like that interaction with his son ultimately does change things.
Yeah.
So
we'll touch on it there, but those scenes bookend the trilogy of all characters to whatever. Like Han Solo is bookending this trilogy, which is really cool too. But so my next thing, like you said, it was Kylo Ren. I had Han Solo written, then Kylo Ren. I didn't know, for whatever reason, I guess I was just an idiot, but I didn't think Kylo Ren was going to be a Skywalker. Like, I wasn't sure who it was going to be. And then about midway through the movie, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's Han and Leia's son. But I mean, I know there's a lot of theories out there about who he was going to be.
Yeah.
Some people thought he was going to be Luke Skywalker. Like, there was that, like, oh, you know, we haven't seen Luke in anything. And I was like,
I remember that.
Well, guys, I don't know. I've seen the trailer. Mark Hamill's not that tall or that skinny anymore. So, like, I don't know that it is Luke. But
skeptical on that one.
Yeah. But so Kylo Ren, Adam Driver, will kind of like flesh that out between the two there. But easily, I think the best actor that Star Wars has had or ever will have. I don't think Star Wars will land another Adam Driver. Hasn't happened before. It's been almost 10 years since The Force Awakens came out. Hasn't happened after. Not that there's bad, like everyone's bad or anything, but Adam Driver's in a league of his own. And it's not the type of movie he would necessarily make if you kind of look at all that he's done. And he said it before, like, you know, it's not his cup of tea and he may not ever do another movie like this. But I'm glad he did hop in on it because he takes a very complex character, a very Skywalker character. You get that whiny Luke Skywalker from Tatooine in him, right? You see him just kind of being like emotionally maybe not fully mature there. You've got, he looks like Anakin with the hair, obviously falling to the dark side, a lot of rage going on. He's leading a group though. I mean, you've got the Leia there, those aspects as well. So the only aspect you don't see in him is Han for the longest. Eventually you do. But it's just a really good character. I mean, he's my favorite sequel trilogy character, and his lightsaber's cool. He acts really good. You can tell like he's conflicted from the get-go. So I like Kylo Ren a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things people miss. Like, people tend to not like kind of the whiny childishness of it. But like this is like one of the things Adam Driver does really, really well with the character is the balance between like at times being incredibly menacing, right? Like that opening scene.
He's huge, by the way.
With Poe, he is a big guy. With Poe, when he's meeting with Lor Santeca and getting the like that scene when he shows up and just handles things is just he's so intimidating. And he's like, oh, this is a bad guy, and he knows what he's doing. But then he has those fits, right, where he's like trying so hard to be the bad guy because it's not natural for him, right? Like he's fighting it so hard. Like that's where the Han Solo thing comes in, right? Like he knows he has to sever this thing that is pulling him back to the light. He knows it's there. Yeah. And he's like a kid who's trying too hard to be the bad guy.
He's constantly conflicted.
It comes across so well as just like someone who's so conflicted and trying so hard, but the cracks show. And so I love the way the characters played in that. I do think Adam Driver did a great job balancing those things because I imagine that's hard to do.
And you get Matt, the radar technician, out of this, right? Like he's Kylo Ren. Listen, people forget this. Kylo Ren was such a big hit that they get Adam Driver on SNL, and that was probably the most memorable skit of the year for that year of SNL. Funny. It was so funny,
yeah, it's great. Like I went back and watched it not that long ago because I don't remember, it popped up in my head, and I just pulled it up on YouTube and just laughed at it. It's so
Kylo
funny.
Ren has an 8-pack.
It's so good.
So good.
Yeah. So if you have no idea what you're talking about, please right now go watch.
Stop this and go watch Matt the Radar Tech on SNL. There's fantastic. Actually 2 of those now, right? He does another one for.
It's like a little follow up. Yeah,
it's not as funny as the first one, but it's still good
like,
too.
The undercover boss thing, like that's hilarious.
We're going undercover boss on Star Killer Base. Yeah,
Kylo. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your next one?
Easily one of the best characters. The best new character, I would say for sure.
Easily. Yeah. So easily.
What else I got on here? I like Finn's character in The Force Awakens. Okay. I think it's cool that we get this little bit of a sneak peek into the stormtroopers, right? And that, you know, we don't get a whole lot of backstory on him, but it seems like, they've just been kind of brainwashed and thrown into this thing. And here's a reluctant guy who's not really fallen in, and he ends up being the guy who runs off and joins this big thing. So we've never really had a defector character like that. Han Solo, he was the smuggler who kind of joined the cause, but this is like literally a guy from the other side who ends up swept up in this big thing. And the reluctant hero, right? Like very much, I just want to get out of here. I just want to get away from the First Order. And it's played really well, right? Like from the early scenes where he's escaping to the conflict when they're on Tokodana and just he's leaving, and you're really disappointed in him. Like you're like, come on, man. Like, but then his final arc where he steps up and is able to go toe to toe with Kylo Ren very briefly.
Very briefly.
I like his arc. Like, I know there's not a whole lot to it in this, but I think it's well done. And I think John Boyega plays the character really well throughout this movie.
Yeah.
Just in terms of showing that progression for his character.
Yeah, I mean, his main story, like people say, oh, he ends up being force sensitive or whatever, but his main story is someone who doesn't belong going to someone who does, and almost the Han Solo story too, of like he's a runner. He ran from the First Order. He tried to run from the Resistance, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, he's done running, which we will talk about again later. Yeah. But he's a character that has no home, no family, and he finds it. That's as Star Wars as it gets. Thing.
Yeah, that's true.
It's as Star Wars as it gets there. Yep. There's a lot of just really good themes that this movie starts us off with.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else on Finn?
No, just kind of I like the way his character goes in this movie, and I do think it's played really well. I think he's a fun character in The Force Awakens.
I have next great acting. So if you look at The Force Awakens, really the sequel trilogy as a whole, there are no acting issues. I mean, we already talked about Adam Driver being the best Star Wars actor, but Daisy Ridley's great, relatively unknown.
Yeah.
Her audition tape for The Force Awakens, I mean, you can see why they picked her. She's way into it. Her audition was that scene where Kylo Ren is like reading her mind,
That's intense.
Have you seen it? Have you seen the audition tape?
Gosh, I can't imagine that being your audition.
She's really like intense. In tears in the audition. Like she's doing good. So I mean, and they were like, after that, they were like, this is gonna be Rey. And so she does so good. John Boyega's great. I mean, he's a great actor. Mm-hmm. You've obviously got Harrison Ford there. I mean, there's nothing that can go wrong there.
Oscar
Andy
Isaac,
Serkis,
great actor.
You're a big fan.
I love Andy Serkis. Yeah. I'll watch anything that he's in. I'm there for. He's so good.
Domhnall Gleeson, Hux, he's good.
Side note, Hux is one of my things I like about this movie. Yeah. It's not a big thing to talk about, but man,
he's so imperial, isn't he?
I love his speech at Starkiller Base. Like it's such a focused, unhinged, like dictator vibe. Mm-hmm. Where he's out of his mind, but he's so committed.
He's like spitting.
He's out of his mind and committed to this. Like I really love that speech. Like I think it really delivers his character. But no, I love him in The Force Awakens.
Yeah. Lupita Nyong'o is Maz Kanata. She's top class actress.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they Oscar Isaac, you said, but also top of the line actor. If you see the picture back in 2013 or 12 when they did the original reading, and it's like all Mark Hamill's there reading the script with everybody, and you've got all these new faces, all the old faces. I mean, it's a pretty good cast that they had in this movie. So
that's for sure.
That can't always be said out of a film, series, but they did very good in the sequel trilogy. I think on casting, acting, no complaints there.
Yeah, I think so. You got anything else
for this movie or the acting? I have two more for this movie. I can run through them real quick.
Yeah, what you got?
We said we were going to go 30 minutes, and we're 24 into The Force Awakens. So, two things. One, there's just that aspect of mystery that you want in the start of a trilogy. So the whole thing, and they play it up so well, is who is Rey? So Han's like, who are you? And then They play up on it in The Last Jedi as well. Luke asked the question, but then you've got on Takadano where Maz is like, who is the girl? And Han leans in like he's going to tell her, and the scene cuts, and you don't know what he says. Yeah. So like you've got that mystery there. She goes and gets Luke's saber out of that box, and the vision happens, and you're like, oh man. Obi-Wan Kenobi talked to her. Like she sees these Knights of Ren. She sees the duel on Bespin. Like there's, she sees Luke's Jedi Academy getting burned down. Like she sees all kinds of stuff. And that whole question of who is Rey, that was the talk of the next 2 years.
The majority of the discussions surrounding the Star Wars franchise in between those two movies was her lineage. Like the number of theories and
they're so good
digging up like so many different like little minute details, trying to piece things together. No, you're right. That sense of mystery definitely landed well because people were really invested in trying to figure that out.
Talking about it, lots of talking, and you want people talking about your movie. So if you make $1 billion on a movie, a lot of people went and saw it. A lot of people kept talking about it. So I mean, I remember I went and bought the Blu-ray of this after. Like, who buys disc anymore? This was still the time when you do it. But I did it
10 years ago.
Yeah, but I was watching it and like coming up with my own ideas. So the mystery, they kept everybody on the hook, and then kind of playing on that cliffhanger ending. So like the whole thing is building up to finding Luke Skywalker, and you finally do, and then the movie ends. Like there's no lines. He's just looking there. She's holding the saber out.
The last thing I have written is just that final shot on Acto. Like it's
so good.
It's beautiful. Like just the setting,
on set.
And then you see Luke for the first time, and it just ends with that standoff between the two of them. It's a great final shot for the movie for sure.
Yeah, and again, kind of in the mystery, for the next 2 years, it was one, who is Rey, and two, what's Luke gonna do?
Yeah,
and so that was 2 years of just talking about that, and then obviously like who is Snoke, all those other
there were a lot of
things
other
like that. There's a lot to talk about. So that was just The Force Awakens was good. It was so good, especially at the time. A lot of fun. So that was good. So really, really quickly now, moving into The Last Jedi. So The Last Jedi, I'll start us off on this one.
Okay.
Kylo Ren and Rey. First of all, they have such a great performance. They carry this movie. And you don't really expect that to be what happens, right? So you come in and you're like, because this is Mark Hamill's movie of the trilogy, and so you're like, oh, it's gonna be a Luke Skywalker centric movie, and it was, but Kylo Ren and Rey, they keep having this, what we learned to be the dyad, but they just keep having these Force connections, and they're talking, and they're kind of revealing this backstory that we don't know. Kylo Ren's explaining it. Rey is kind of starting to see that light that's still in him, and they both just the actors there, Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver, do an excellent job with the roles they're given in this movie. I thought it was really good. I remember leaving the theater kind of not being sure how I felt about the movie, but for sure being sure that I thought Rey and Kylo Ren's story was just so interesting in that movie.
Yeah, because they do a really good job of like, they don't understand why there's this weird connection between them.
Yeah.
And I think it's so significant and powerful that they're both kind of off guard by it. And they don't know what to do with it, right? Neither one of them understands it. Rey certainly doesn't like it, especially in the beginning, right? Like she is fighting against it, and Kylo Ren's really intrigued by it, right? And so you have those two sides of this thing where one is really wanting to probe this thing and figure out what's going on. The other's like, I don't want anything to do with this.
Get out of my head,
But they do kind of start to meet in the middle, not necessarily because either one of them wants to, but just because the pull is so significant. Like this,
they literally meet in the middle at one point, right? Like over the fire. Like you finally kind of see that happening. So
yeah. So that is a really. They do a really good job of showing kind of the conflict and the confusion and just the nature of that connection that, again, neither one of them really understands why
they
it's
weren't
there.
looking for it.
I like that too. I thought it was good.
Because at one point he's like, why does this keep happening?
Yeah.
and it's kind of like because she's like, "Can you put a shirt on?" You know, like
Yeah.
I think that was
Yeah.
that one scene. You know,
Yeah.
the Ben Swallow scene. So that's the memes. So yeah, that's
some good memes
that,
came out of it. Yeah,
lots of good memes. We should
lots
list
of good
that as a
memes.
thing. So yeah, that was one thing I thought, and it goes to the very end of the movie, like when they're fighting and he's like, you're still holding on, like, and that's just such a good scene. A lot of memes out of that as well, obviously, but that's a good speech he gives, like when she's like the resistance, and he's like, let's ditch all of this, let the past die, and then she's just not willing to let go, and he's really mad about it. And I thought that was a good because you think this whole time that they are going to end up on the same side, and then they bring you up to that point in the throne room where he does join her, and then you're like, oh, kind of subvert your expectations a little, and then finally you see like, no, they are going to go their separate paths after this whole movie kind of building up their characters. Then he's not quite ready to let the past go the way he says, and I think that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, no, one of the things I really like about his character throughout this is he becomes really resolved in his path, right? Like within this connection that exists between them, you could really argue that she's the one most tempted, you know, to move to come to this other person. And by the end, I love that Kylo Ren's like, you know what, I don't need to be Vader, right? I don't need Snoke. I'm kind of done being the guy that gets ordered around, and he decides that he is full in, right? Like he's supreme leader. He's going to take the reins. Like there's no hesitation for him towards Rey, really. Like he wants her to join him, but he's becomes really resolute in this, you know what, I'm the First Order, right? Like this is my thing. And he does, man. He takes over. I love that resolution that he arrives to in this movie, because I think it's really cool for his character. Instead of going the other way, like being tempted towards the light, he's like, no, I'm full in, right? Like I'm done being in the background. I'm the guy now. And he does. I like that.
Yeah, he's fully at the end of this movie. He's done with the good. You think, at least. Yeah. So yeah, that was my first one. Just the Rey and Kylo Ren story, I thought was really strong, especially the acting in it. I thought it was really good.
I really like the opening scene to this movie. I think it's really tense. I think it's really, really good. I think I don't remember her name. What's Rose's sister's name?
Paige Tico.
Yes, I think that whole sequence is really good. Like just it's very Rogue One-ish a little bit, just taking a moment to focus in away from our big characters and just focus in on this random person who's dying in the fight. I think that's always a cool thing to pull the lens back to. But then it shifts, right? And I love how it shifts to like Poe's all hyped up because they blew up the ship, and but it becomes this leadership tension between him and Leia, and he has a really cool arc in The Last Jedi where he understands that he really doesn't know anything about leadership, and he doesn't know anything about leading a rebellion. And as much as he hates it at the beginning, you know, he realizes that everything Leia says about him is right. So I really like Poe's arc throughout this. I think the tension between him and Leia, where she really puts him in his place.
She's funny.
And his resentment to that, and he's like, no, and he goes off and does his own thing, and later realizes like this was a problem, right? Like this, I am a problem, and I like she is what leadership looks like. And we see him change, and we see him adapt a better leadership style. So I really like his growth in this movie, and I think Oscar Isaac plays it so well throughout that story. So he's one of the highlights for The Last Jedi for me. Yeah,
he gets a big focus in this movie as well. Because in The Force Awakens, he's not in it a whole lot.
No,
but he does get a big character development here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see where to go next here. So let's go. I like the pacing. So this movie does a really good job keeping things moving. Not super fast paced, but they use. Just starting off the movie, you understand how it's going to go, because they've got the resistance on the end of a string, is what they say. Like, it's like we know where they're going to go with this hyperspace jumping. So the whole tension of this movie is the resistance just trying to get far enough away to stay out of range, but the First Order keeps getting them, and eventually they're going to run out of fuel, and what's going to happen? So there's this race against time going on. And I liked that because it kept, like, you're pretty tense the whole time, because anytime you're back with that, with what's going on with the resistance in the movie, like when they're not on Octo, but to an extent when they are, because at some point it does start to kind of bleed over into it, I believe. Because I think Rey's like going back or something. She's got the little beacon thing, I guess. I don't know. But either way, you kind of know, okay, at some point there's going to be this spot where they do get caught. And so I really did like the pacing for the movie as well. I thought, and they talked about it a lot beforehand. Like, we think we have a good movie that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat, and they did. It kept, okay, they've not got him yet. They've not got him yet. Are they going to make it back in time? And so I like that.
Yeah, you're right. There is a significant tension on the not rebellion. What do we call them now? I guess they're back to being resistance. Thank you. Gosh,
they're the rebellion by the end of the movie. They take that because Finn's like rebel scum. Like you start to see that turn. Yeah.
No, on their side of things, there is that significant tension. Just in that, it's like just that slow burn chase, where it's just like inching closer and closer. Resources are dwindling, and you keep shifting back to what you're waiting to be like the answer, right? Like, is Rey going to get back? Like, or is Finn going to get back? And so
Rey's going to get back.
You shift back and forth that, and every time you come back, you realize that it's still a problem, right? Yeah. So that does do a good job of providing like a driving tension.
Yeah.
Because it's that's it. Like, that's the forces. Like, they've kind of dwindled down. This is who they have left in their corner.
Very low.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was. I thought pacing was good.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of my favorite things in this movie is Yoda.
Yeah.
I love Yoda and Luke's interaction. I really, well, first I appreciate that it's the physical prop. I love that they went back to the puppet.
Frank Oz came back.
It's just so nostalgic to the original trilogy. I loved that. But man, he comes in and he just provides this insight that, like, you go back and you look at the prequel trilogy and the mistakes that were made in the Jedi Council and just their obsession with the dogma and the following the rules at the expense of people, right? And Yoda's like, you don't need that stuff, right? Like, he's like, let me just burn it for you, right? Like, and so I love that it seems like in this time, Yoda's realized that, like, it wasn't the dogma, it was the teaching, right? The master and the apprentice, like, taking care of your apprentice, right? Like what they really didn't do with Anakin.
Right.
I love that we kind of see that new perspective from Yoda. With prequel Yoda, he's all about the rules, right? He's all about, this is the way the Jedi Council does things. This is the way the Jedi Order does things. And now we see a Yoda who's like, forget it, burn it all. Like, that's not what you need. You have everything you need to be a good teacher. You just need to go do it. And so I love that interaction. I love that Luke's still floundering and still unsure of himself, and that there's still that one last lesson that Yoda can give to him. So I love that whole interaction. I think it's for me, it's one of the highlights of the movie when those two sit down.
Of the trilogy for me.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah. When they sit down and they have that talk, I think that's one of the parts that's just done so well.
Yeah.
And really connects to just everywhere within the movies. So
I'm going to piggyback off that too, because so first of all, with the Yoda thing, it's such a full circle moment for Yoda and Luke almost at the same time, because like you said with Yoda in the prequels, he's all about the rules. Now by the end of Revenge of the Sith, he's like, we failed, obviously. And so he's got to go away for a little bit. And in the original trilogy, though, the Yoda you see is really a Yoda they know Luke and Leia are that last hope. And so the whole, the training is not necessarily centered around Jedi stuff or even getting past the rules of the Jedi. It's around like, hey, you're going to have to face Vader. And this is what you're going to need to know to face Vader. Yeah. And so it doesn't really focus on righting those wrongs there. And so you get to The Last Jedi and you do have that whole full circle moment where we see them rectifying the issues of the prequels with it's not this legalistic mumbo jumbo. That's not a Jedi. A Jedi is, like you said, the master and apprentice, and what you can pass on to them, and then ultimately letting go when it's time to let go. And so then we see Luke. That's moving into my next thing. Mark Hamill's return as Luke Skywalker. Loved it. So it's been since '83 since we've seen this, and so finally gets his movie. And Mark Hamill does a stellar job with the character. Because he said his goal at one point, one of the articles and interviews before the movie was, I wanted to win a Oscar for this. Like I'm putting everything I have into this role. And so he does, and he does a really good job telling the story that they gave him to tell. And you see Luke Skywalker's story go from like a very surprising point, to say the least, with him being a recluse. You see him in a bad spot. And then by the end of it, he has that lesson from Yoda. And he's at that point, he's ready. He's taking that next step. And so we see Luke also making that full circle moment where has the issue of, what can this legend Luke Skywalker do? Go down and stare down the First Order by myself with a lightsaber? And what does he do at the end? He projects himself. He stares down the First Order with a lightsaber, and he stalls just long enough for his friends to get away, which, what does that remind you of? Ben Kenobi in A New Hope, stalling just long enough for his friends to get away and for the rebellion to have a chance. And that's exactly what happens in The Last Jedi. Now, again, a little bit of a different path to get there, but that full circle moment that gets there with Luke, it's like, he learned from his master, and he goes and he gives his apprentice Rey this new hope for the galaxy. He gives her that same chance. And so I think that's really cool seeing that.
Yeah, that is a great parallel between them in terms of how their stories end. And I think some people had hoped that they would see, Luke go out in a blaze of glory, right? Like fighting. But
that's never how he was.
Well, and I like this, right? Like I think it establishes who he is now, that he may have stepped back, right? Like he's not the forefront of this thing anymore, but he's a Jedi master, right? Like he is a master of the Force. And I love that the thing he did, like, so it's I love that they connect it with some other things, like some of the EU lore with the Falanasi. Like they were masters of like illusion type stuff. Like they weren't very good with like telekinetic stuff. They couldn't move things very well, but they were really good at projecting things in the Force. And so I think in a comic or something, they actually did connect that.
I had to look it up.
But yeah, he uses this technique where he's really like projecting all of his Force self into the cosmic Force, which allows him to be somewhere else. And just the sheer immense level of mastery of the Force to pour himself into that across the galaxy to appear to such an extent. Like, I think it's cool that he goes out as a master, right? He's not the hotshot pilot, Jedi Knight, Luke Skywalker anymore. He's the Jedi Master. So I like how his story concludes. I think it's fitting. I mean, you can't help but love the imagery there at the end, with the sun setting, and so I mean that's a great scene. I do love that.
Well, also just really quick on the Luke, and we'll move on from Luke, but this is the same Luke Skywalker. If you look at the original trilogy, does he ever solve anything fully, like consequentially, with striking down someone with a lightsaber? No.
That's a good point.
Not the entire time. His defining moment in Return of the Jedi is throwing the lightsaber down, right? And so his defining moment in this sequel trilogy is when he literally throws himself down, right? So like he does that projection. And so he never, very unlike Anakin, is not the character that goes out in a blaze of glory. He's the one that goes out by showing that there's a different path. And so he does it here. I think it's very cool. Do you have any other big points for this movie? I know we have more points, but like any big points?
Yeah, the last big thing that I liked and this shifted, this changed, but I liked the notion and the idea that that the Force is not partial, right?
Okay,
like we had Anakin as the chosen one, right? But beyond that, like the Force just manifests in who it chooses, right? And so
it's there. Yeah.
I liked the idea that they kind of alluded to that Rey would be a nobody, right? That she didn't have to be anybody to make her own legacy, right? To choose her own path. And I love how it just concludes with that kid at the end, right? Who
broom boy,
just grabs the broom with and it
He's
really broadens the picture to like the Force is not just within these special people, but like there are people all over the galaxy who have this, and you know, are potential people who have the potential to go and change the galaxy, right? Like, so I like very that hopeful idea, that outside the Skywalkers, outside these legends and characters, that there are other people, right? You and it connects things like with Ezra Bridger, right? Random kid,
just random
turns
kid
out to be a Jedi Knight, right? And so, I like that idea that it pushes that. Hey, we know we have these legends of the Force, but really the Force is everywhere, and like anybody can have a path that changes things. I like that message, and I like that.
No, it is good. Like that there's hope out there, because just immediately before it, they're like, is there anyone out there? And then it's like, there's people out there that our heroes have already came across. They don't even know it yet. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I have just a few minor things here just to go through. So one, again, the movie looked good. Like Ryan Johnson kind of put his own little, like they all have their own little color palette in these movies, and so his like kind of that reddish hue. So good looking movie. The throne room fight looked really good.
It does.
Right, really cool to see the Praetorian Guard, like, you know, because in the originals they just kind of stand there, and you actually see them fighting here, so that's pretty cool. I thought Chewie was funny in this movie. You don't get a ton of him, but you get enough where like he has this like relationship with the Porgs.
Oh, Chewie and the Porgs is great.
Yeah, it's funny. By the end of it, he's got a Porg flying with him, which is funny. So I like that. I like that he's kind of accepted, like he's staying with the Falcon. Like he's not out of this fight. So that's a pretty cool thing too.
Yeah.
And then lastly, very minor, but I thought DJ was a cool character. I liked his character when he's explaining to Finn, like, because Finn's got this very tunnel vision view of what's going on. Now, obviously, the First Order's bad. Don't hear what I'm not saying, but he kind of lets him know, like, oh, this rich guy that you think is so bad, you know, you think he just made all of his money selling to the First Order, but you're like, no, he's actually selling to both sides. And then DJ's saying, like, there's a little bit of a middle ground to this whole issue. Like, you can't just look at it just like this. And I thought that was an interesting concept. And DJ literally, like, meaning don't join. Like, that's how they came up with his name. And so I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. Like, even a bigger picture into the world that we live in. Like, there's a lot of gray area out there. And I think that kind of alludes to maybe some of the gray area going on in this fictitious story as well.
Yeah, I do like DJ. It's Benicio del Toro, right?
Yeah,
who the actor is. He does such a good job of just making this really quirky, odd guy, and you just
so odd.
He's so short on screen, but you're just like, I want to know more about DJ.
So interesting.
Like, I would love a short story about how he ended up in jail on Canto Bight, right? Like, I think that would be I would love that. He's just such a cool character.
Tales of the Smugglers, and like he's one of them or something. Yeah,
just because he's so quirky and so unique, but obviously pretty brilliant, right? Like,
he knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing. So I feel like there's a cool story to be told with DJ. It'd be cool to get that one day. So.
Yeah, and maybe it's out there. I'm not like 100% up on all. Like, I do read the comics and stuff, but like at a much slower pace than actual people who read books. So if that story is out there, let us know in the comments. Anything else on The Last Jedi?
I think that's it. That's all I got.
It. Okay, we're talking so much more than I thought we would. This is a positive thing.
Yeah,
I thought we were going to be 30 minutes and out. So the Rise of Skywalker. I'm going to save Han Solo to the end.
That's good.
I'm going to talk about him at the end.
It's a high point.
So, again, I'll start off just with this one as well. It looks good. So J.J. Abrams had a feel for what he wanted this to look like, and he worked on this on a very short turnaround as well. 18 months to make this movie, which is not a lot of... and 18 months for it to come out, like, to the screens. So that's even less time to work on the movie. So, but he had an idea for how he wanted it to look. And there's even, I read something about this at some point where when they were on Disney Plus, when it got to Disney Plus, they even like maybe applied some other kind of like almost a filter to this just to give it that grainy bluish feel throughout the whole movie. And I just thought that was an interesting thing because I don't know film and things like that, like little things like that. I know nothing of that. I just watch like a normal person, and just seeing like that tone that it kind of gives for a lot of the movie, that blue exegol tone almost. I thought it looked cool. I like that.
Yeah, you're right. They all do kind of have their own vibe and feel to them.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, they all look great. Like none of them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that any one looks better than any of the others. They just all kind of have their own feel, which is kind of unique.
This one has that grainy like look to it though, and I do like that when you're watching it. It's got, and if you've seen it, like you know what I'm talking about when I say it. It's neat.
Yeah. Orchestral score for this movie it's
good.
Amazing.
It's good. The orchestral. That's a word. If you had that on your bingo card for a person from South Carolina and originally Alabama talking about words.
I know words good.
I know words good. Orchestral.
Yeah. No, it's the music in this movie is, I think if you go and you look at just the music in every setting and every plot point, like it just fits and meshes so well. I mean, it's John Williams. It's what you expect. I mean,
it's always good.
Obviously nobody questions or second guesses John Williams, but it is.
He's even in the movie.
It is. It's probably my favorite score of the three movies, though. So,
well,
I mean, that's just a little thing, but
just looking at the score, like I think the best score from the original trilogy is Return of the Jedi. I think because it's got all the stuff from the previous movies, plus all of the indoor music, which is fun. Yeah. Plus Jabba's palace, like it's good. In the prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith has the best score. You get Duel of the Fates, plus Battle of the Heroes, plus you've got the Across the Stars theme at points.
Yeah, it blends them all.
You get it all, and then Episode 9 has like almost all of everything. Like it takes just a lot of the Imperial suite. You get the Rebellion in it. You get Leia's theme, Luke's theme. You get that the music from Empire Strikes Back when Yoda is lifting the X-wing. You have Luke lifting it, playing the same score. All the feels there.
Yep.
It's good. It gives you all the feels for this movie.
Yeah, for
That's a good point. So I have kind of, not along those lines, but sort of, a lot of Easter eggs pulling you back to other things, right? Yeah. So like just little things like Luke lifting the X-wing, kind of like, oh, that's a throwback to Empire Strikes Back. Or, you know, you've got the Ghost is in it, right? At the very end on Exegol. You see the Ghost there. You see a Razor Crest top, ship. It's not the Razor Crest, they say. We'll see. But, you know, we'll see. There could be some stuff there.
You get Akbar's in there. Nub's in there.
Akbar's
you get a lot of.
Is Akbar in? No, he's not. Akbar's not.
Didn't he die in this one?
They put him in the
Last Jedi. Was that previous one? Oh, that was Last Jedi. He died.
Nub dies in this one.
Yeah, I knew he died in this one. So Akbar died in Last Jedi.
The Tantive 4 is in this one, right? Like the Tantive goes into this battle on Exegol, right? That's a bookend of Star Wars right there. You start with the Tantive, and it literally ends for the Tantive there as well.
Yep. Wedge Antilles is in this, right? Isn't he?
He is. Yep. Wedge is
a gunner for somebody.
For Chewbacca, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Or on the X-wing, right? He's the gunner on the X-wing.
Yeah.
I think.
Man,
not the X-wing, the Millennium Falcon.
Disney's got While we're talking about cutting back on shows, they need to do a show
on Wedge.
Just Rogue Squadron, man. Just give me X-wing dogfights, man. That's all.
We'll get it at some point.
I hope so.
There's what else? What other Easter eggs are there? Like, so there's like the cloning, right? So you bring kind of the cloning. You get the
cloning comes back
Palpatine gives the whole unnatural spiel again, right? Yeah. So you got
there is
that
a lot.
Going
there's
there.
Talk
all
about
those
it later,
Sith
but like
on Exegol, those
Kylo
statues
Ren's
you see.
Turn to the light side is a huge parallel.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
the second Death Star.
All sorts. Oh, I love the second Death Star homage. Yep. I love that they just find it wrecked there on the planet.
Lots of Easter eggs. How about when you've got an X-wing and a TIE fighter parked right next door to each other, going to end this saga, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
on Exegol when it pans just to the X-Wing and
It
TIE
lands
Fighter
there,
right
yeah.
next to each other. That's pretty cool
that's
too.
cool.
Lots of
That
little
is cool.
little tidbits in this movie. I thought,
Yep.
Dengar is in the movie, right? Like they've got
Oh, yeah.
he's like that droid.
He's like super
DN.
CGI though.
Yeah.
Like he looks really awkward.
But another Easter egg.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are a lot. Yeah.
All right, what's next for you?
Oh, Babu Frick.
Yeah, he was on my list too.
Love Babu Frick. He's it's just hilarious. Like the whole sequence when he's involved, you just can't help but laugh and smile.
You
at
want
the whole,
more of him.
The whole you do, yeah. The whole exchange, and now we all love the Anzellans now.
Yeah.
Like
Droid go blank.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that whole sequence with him and C-3PO is pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
So I love Babu Frick.
We watched this movie together. I don't know if you remember this or not in theaters, but when at the very end, when it's like when Poe sees that Zori is still alive, and he's like, "Y'all made it," and then like Babu Frick pops out and goes, "Hey," and everyone in the theater was like applauding when this happened. We're like, "Yes, he made it." So. Yeah, very
Zori?
good character.
Okay, Babu Frick. Oh, good. We were worried.
I mean, he had a special place in our heart. Still does. Love some Babu Frick. You know who the voice of that is?
If I had to guess, I don't know. If I had to guess, I would just say Alan Tudyk.
No, I'm going to look this up.
He does a lot of voices too.
No, it's the girl from Harry Potter.
Oh, is it? I just threw Alan Tudyk out there because he literally does voices in everything.
Shirley Henderson, who is in Harry Potter, she plays... Hold on.
Bill Hader's BB-8.
Yes, he is.
That's right. That's why I had him in my mind.
Moaning Myrtle.
Oh, that's who it is?
Yep,
that's
same
hilarious.
Voice.
I did not know that. I'm not
the Potterhead that maybe you are, or my wife, she's a Potterhead. But yeah, Moaning Myrtle's voice is also Babu Frick's. Yeah.
Didn't know that. That's pretty...
The more you know.
It's a pretty funny connection.
Yep. How about C-3PO going next there? This was, like, we talked about every movie having, like, okay, the first movie was Han's, then it was Luke's, and then it was Leia's. And unfortunately, like, Carrie Fisher had passed before even the filming of this movie. And they still did a good job making this, as good as they could with the situation, making this Leia's movie. But this is kind of C-3PO's movie as well. I mean, he really does.
Plays a pretty central role,
Plays a very central role. You get so much C-3PO humor where they're like, when he makes that joke when they're on Pasana, and they're like, "Oh, how lucky that we're here. It's this festival." And they all turn around and look, and he turns around to see what they're looking at, but they're looking at him. Like they're so sick of him. And he's like, "Did I miss something?"
Yeah.
And he's funny the whole movie. Like it's so good. Then he delivers that line when they're about to blank his memory. He's like, "I'm taking one last look at my friends." And that's like, that's kind of deep. Yeah. In my head, he's not looking at them. He's like replaying in his head, like, everybody, because he's got it all there.
That's true.
And so I think C-3PO is very strong in this movie. And then when they put his memory back in and he doesn't like remember he's like, Babu Frick, my oldest friend. And then he goes back to R2, and R2 like is kind of giving him the what are you talking about? Like, we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
That was good.
No, I certainly wouldn't have expected that C-3PO's story would be like one of the major emotional like
it really
was in the story. You're just like, like he's given up his memory, and so that was that was unexpected, but it was his argument. It was really good story
and
for
just
him.
The C-3PO humor all throughout that you want in that movie. So because it was a
really
fast-paced movie, and he was those few kind of breaks in the movie, if you will.
Yeah.
What do you have next?
I don't have any more little things.
Okay, I have one more little thing and then a big one.
Let's hear it.
Exegol was cool. The idea of this like Sith planet that you can't get to,
been in hiding.
Sith are interesting anyways, and so just kind of.
I mean, it's a very Sith-like thing, right? To kind of be hidden away, away from everyone.
And Palpatine would have a backup plan, like this is very cheating death like of him. So he's got the secret planet no one can get to. He's got, when they're talking about like the final order, like, oh, he had Order 66 and now he's got all these other orders that he's going to get rid of things. Like, it was Palpatine-esque, and all of that being on Exegol, I thought that was cool. Exegol looked cool. It had like, it made
cool
canon
place.
some of these Sith lords of the past, because you see their statues and stuff. So I was a fan of Exegol.
Yeah,
the Battle of Exegol was cool.
It was one of the
ships and stuff.
One of the few like really large scale, like space battles
it's the largest scale space battle we see,
for sure,
as far as numbers go. But yeah,
for sure.
So for the deep stuff now, kick us off.
Well, I mean, I think really the biggest payoffs for me in this movie occur between during that interact, where Rey and Kylo fight again at the second Death Star wreckage, and then the scene with Kylo and Han, like that whole sequence of events, is one of the high points of the movie for me. Because first you get, I mean, you have this battle between Rey and Kylo Ren, and in that kind of pivotal moment where Leia reaches out and he stops and she stabs him, and
she gets,
and then so then we have, I really like that we get the parallel with Kylo Ren's redemption comes really in a similar way that his grandfathers did, right? That his opponent shows mercy and casts down their, doesn't cast down their weapon, but walks away essentially. And that example of something different, right? That this thing that I've been pursuing hasn't worked out, and here I see somebody stand over me and choose something other than the path I've chosen. Like that's kind of what shifts Vader, and we see it's kind of what shifts Kylo Ren as well, right? So I really like that parallel that we get with the two of them, and then with Luke and Vader, in terms of how he finally sees that he doesn't have to be on this path.
There's another way.
Yeah.
That was what I had written down next to.
And then of course it leads to that next scene, which is probably my favorite scene in the whole trilogy, sequel trilogy. Between Han Solo's image,
whatever it was,
right? Because it's not a Force ghost, right? Like
it's just what Kylo Ren remembered of.
I like thinking that, like, in this moment, obviously Kylo Ren's realized he's lost everything, right? Like, his family's gone, right? He has no family left, really. He has this weird connection with Rey, right? That they still
she just stole his ship and left.
Understand, right? This girl who just beat him and showed him mercy, and that's really the only tether he has at this point. So I like that in this moment he goes back to that moment on Starkiller Base,
on the bridge.
Where it's almost like he is wondering how that conversation could have been different, right? Because so much of the dialogue is the same, like word for word.
It is word for word. Yep.
And so it's almost like Kylo Ren going back and thinking, like, there was a different path, right? Like, I could have chosen different. I could have gone with my father. And in that moment realizes that there's a different way to do something. And so I love the resolution that comes in that. I love, like you mentioned earlier, the way it bookends things. And that Han Solo's death, which at the time seems pointless, right? Seems to have no part in the story other than Kylo Ren thinks it's going to sever him from the light.
Right.
Like, that's the thing that he comes back to and is like, my father, this was my father's sacrifice. And like, they're like, and seeing that there's a different way to do things now. I love that he goes back and replays that. I think that's probably one of the high points of the whole sequel for me, is the way those two things fit together at the beginning and the end.
I think it is the high point for me, just looking back on it as a whole, because what Kylo Ren thinks is his turning point at one point in life. He finally got past Han Solo. And that was supposed to be his big turning point. That exact same moment comes back, and it is his turning point. But not in the way he thought. It's in his turning point back to the light. And so I think that's just really cool. Again, you would never have been like, you know what? It's going to be Han Solo that is the driving message of this trilogy. And it kind of, in a way, is. So if you watch Star Wars, like, it's about family. So in the prequels, you get that brotherhood with Obi-Wan and Anakin. Almost, they're brother figures, but it's almost like a father-son mentorship deal as well. You get Luke and Vader, obviously. And then this trilogy, you get Han and Kylo Ren. And he just can't get past Han Solo. And the whole thing kind of comes to a head here is he still can't get past Han Solo. And that's okay, because he had a good dad. Like, he doesn't think he did. Yeah. And then he did. And because he's thinking back on his memories, it's not Han Solo there. And so it shows you that, no, Han was a good dad. Like, he is the one who makes that difference for Kylo Ren. And so that's just a really, really cool thing. And of course, it's like a really pretty parallel too. No one expected Harrison Ford to come back again. Like, we all thought, man, he killed off Han Solo and he's out. Like, that's all he's ever wanted is to be done with Han Solo. And Harrison talking about it later on, they were like, was it hard for you to come back? Because you are very on the record not wanting to be Han Solo again. And he was like, it was one of the easiest decisions of my life. Like, they called and they told me what they were doing with that specific scene, and it was a no-brainer to sign back on. Like, he saw how good that was. And he did. So for a guy who's been adamantly wanting rid of Han Solo for like 40 years to come back just like that, it's a good scene.
And that just tells you that's the best usage. There's no better way they could have brought his character back into the story than the way they utilized it right there. That was about as good as you could do for his character.
And I was going to say, too, like, Han Solo just wanted Harrison Ford wanted Han to have a good character arc. Yeah. And he got it in The Force Awakens. Yeah. Can you improve on it?
Absolutely.
Actually, you can. And so he would not have come back if it was something not good, right? Yeah. Like, if it did not
you're probably right.
add to his character arc, he would not have done it. But when you see that what he did in The Force Awakens is what turns things later on, he comes back. And so, for me, that's the best thing about this sequel trilogy, is watching that father-son dynamic and how that is very Star Warsy in and of itself. And you see Kylo Ren going from there as Ben Solo. He goes to Exegol, and he ultimately has to make that very Jedi choice of letting go and doing something that, to his detriment, to further the good of the galaxy. And he does. So, like, he gives up the rest of his life force for Rey, and goes Force Ghost, whatever. And from there, like, you see his story wrap up with kind of an arc that you maybe don't expect as well. So again, just that whole Han Solo scene propelling that, I thought was really good.
Yep. That was really my big thing. That was I don't really have anything else on my card.
I don't have as much on my card for The Rise of Skywalker either. So that was an hour. By the time I edit this, it'll be probably closer to an hour and 5 minutes, but at least like right around an hour and 5 minutes of nice things about the sequel trilogy. Not one negative said.
If you had told me that we were going to sit here and talk for an hour about the sequel trilogy without saying anything negative,
I'd have laughed.
I'd have thought there'd be a whole lot of silence. But that's kind of what I alluded to at the beginning.
Star Wars.
I think there's stuff I appreciate more once I'm willing to step away. It's so easy to be negative.
Yes.
But I love Star Wars.
So comments, if you made it this far and didn't cut it off because you don't want to hear positives about it, fine. But if you hung around that long, thank you. Drop some positives in the comments. Keep the positivity going. I won't delete the negatives unless they're just real ugly. But let us know some positives of the sequel trilogy that you like. Yeah. Looking ahead to next week, it's going to be a fun episode. So we are going to, it will not be an hour and 8 minutes long, I assure you that. But we're going to talk about our favorite Star Wars characters, but we're going to make it very bracketed in. So we're going to talk our favorite character from the movies and just one favorite character from the movies.
It's going to be tough.
From the live action shows and from the animated series. So should be fun. Have to think about it a little, but that's where we're going next week. So thanks again for watching, everyone. This was a lot of fun, a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. So again, thank you, and we will catch you next time.